You don't get in life what you want. You get what you are, and what you are is shaped by what you tolerate. Raise what you expect of yourself, and life will rise to meet you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by telling you something that might sting a little. But it's the truth. If your life isn't where you want it to be, check your standards, because here's the rule. Your standards determine your quality of life. Not your dreams, not your wishes, not your intentions, but your standards. If you tolerate mediocrity, that's what you'll get. If you accept excuses, you'll build a life on them. But if you raise the bar, if you say no more, if you decide to expect more from yourself than anyone else ever could, that's when things begin to shift. You don't get in life what you want. You get what you are willing to tolerate. This simple truth explains why so many people stay stuck despite having big dreams. Your current reality is not just a result of fate or luck. It is a reflection of the standards you've set for yourself, consciously or unconsciously. If you're not happy with the level of your relationships, income, health, or confidence, it's time to stop looking outward and start looking inward. Ask yourself, what have I been willing to accept up until now? Because what you accept, you attract. When you tolerate excuses, laziness, or indecision, those patterns multiply and dominate your life. Jim Rohn used to say, everything changes when you do. The starting point of change is not action. It's decision. A decision to raise your standard. That means you no longer tolerate being late. You no longer tolerate being financially irresponsible. You no longer accept a body you're not proud of. You no longer accept negative self-talk. The shift begins when you say no more. Not because someone else told you to, but because you have decided it is no longer acceptable. That internal shift creates new emotional intensity, new focus, and new results. Standards act like the thermostat of your life. You don't stay at the level of your dreams. You settle at the level of your standards. Want more, expect more from yourself. Want a better life. Raise the rules you live by. Everything changes when you change what's normal for you. And that's the secret. Success doesn't require genius or luck. It requires a higher standard, held with consistency, reinforced by action, and never compromised. If your life feels stuck, you don't need a new goal. You need a new standard. The moment real transformation begins is when you raise your expectations for yourself. Most people are waiting for outside circumstances to improve before they step up. But the truth is, lasting change comes from within. When you shift from simply wanting more to demanding more of yourself, your behavior changes, your discipline sharpens, and your results follow. This isn't about being hard on yourself. It's about deciding that the current version of you is no longer enough for where you're going. It's about recognizing that your potential is being limited by what you're currently settling for. When you raise your internal standards, you stop negotiating with excuses. You stop letting your feelings dictate your actions. You stop quitting on your commitments the moment things get uncomfortable. That's when your identity begins to shift. You start to see yourself not just as someone who wants success, but as someone who expects it and is willing to earn it every day. This shift in identity is powerful. You no longer wait for motivation. You rely on discipline. You no longer hope for better habits. You demand them. Raising your standard is a declaration that says, "This is who I am now." It becomes the new baseline. You show up earlier, think bigger, act bolder, and take full ownership of your life. Not because someone is watching, but because you've raised the level of what you're willing to accept from yourself. That's when growth becomes consistent and confidence becomes natural. The most powerful person in the room isn't the one with the loudest voice. It's the one who holds themselves to the highest standard, quietly, daily, without needing applause. That kind of self-respect attracts better opportunities, better people, and ultimately, a better life. Mediocrity isn't something that sneaks up on you. It's something you allow, little by little. It starts when you let yourself off the hook one too many times. When you say, "Just this once," to skipping the gym, procrastinating on that task, or spending time on things that don't matter. Over time, those small compromises become your norm. The danger of mediocrity is that it's comfortable. It doesn't cause immediate pain, but it slowly robs you of your potential. The harsh truth is, if you tolerate average, you will never rise above it. You will never create an extraordinary life while accepting ordinary behavior from yourself. The people who rise to the top aren't necessarily more talented. They just refuse to settle. They reject the easy road. They say no to shortcuts. They hold themselves to a higher standard even when no one is watching. That refusal to settle becomes their advantage. The key difference between the successful and the average isn't in their goals. It's in what they're willing to accept from themselves every single day. You have to decide what's no longer acceptable in your life. That decision draws a line in the sand. It says, "This is where the old version of me ends." From that point forward, everything changes. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger, sharper, and more intentional. When you stop tolerating mediocrity, your actions rise, your energy shifts, and your life begins to align with your true capabilities. You start to operate from a place of purpose instead of pressure. You stop surviving and start leading. Every time you choose excellence over average, you cast a vote for the future you deserve. And if you keep casting those votes, eventually, excellence becomes who you are. Discipline isn't something you're born with, it's something that grows from the standards you set for yourself. When you hold yourself to a higher level of expectation, discipline becomes less of a struggle and more of a natural response. The reason many people find it hard to stay consistent is because their standards are too negotiable. They wake up and decide how they feel before they decide what they'll do. But those who succeed don't let their feelings decide their actions. Their standards do. When your standard is excellence, you don't ask whether you feel like showing up. You show up because it's who you are. Jim Rohn often said that discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. But that bridge is built only when you decide that certain behaviors are no longer optional. When going to the gym, reading a book, making the extra call, or pushing through discomfort becomes your minimum standard, discipline becomes automatic. It's no longer about motivation, it's about identity, and identity is shaped by what you consistently do, not what you occasionally feel. Raising your standards redefines what normal means for you. Most people think discipline is about force. It's not. It's about alignment. When your actions match your vision and your standards are rooted in clarity and purpose, discipline flows naturally. You don't need to fight with yourself anymore because the decision is already made in advance. High standards eliminate confusion and create certainty. That certainty builds confidence, and confidence turns into momentum. That's why the most successful people don't seem to struggle with discipline. It's not because it's easy for them. It's because they've already decided that the price of discipline is less painful than the cost of regret. And they live that truth every single day. Success doesn't come to those who chase it blindly. It comes to those who become the kind of person success is attracted to. That's why raising your standards is not just about achieving more, but about becoming more. The real win is not just in the external results, it's in the internal transformation. When you demand more from yourself, you grow into a person with greater clarity, stronger habits, and deeper self-respect. That version of you naturally attracts better opportunities, stronger relationships, and more meaningful results, not by luck, but by alignment. It's easy to want success. It's harder to become the kind of person who earns it. You can set all the goals in the world, but if your identity is rooted in old patterns, you'll always sabotage progress. That's why change doesn't begin with strategy. It begins with standards. When you say, "I am a person who follows through," or "I am someone who honors my word," everything else starts to shift. You start to think, act, and live like the person you're trying to become, and the world responds accordingly. This is the quiet truth behind every extraordinary life. It's not just built on ambition. It's built on self-respect. When you raise your standards, you treat yourself like someone who matters. You stop betraying your future for the comfort of the present. You stop lowering yourself to fit into places you've outgrown. Success begins to find you because you've created a strong foundation for it to stand on. And just like gravity, that kind of energy pulls the right people, circumstances, and momentum into your life. When you focus less on chasing and more on becoming, you'll discover that success isn't something you pursue, it's something you embody. When you raise your standards, life becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. Many people are overwhelmed not because they have too many tasks, but because they don't have a firm set of personal rules. They hesitate, procrastinate, and second-guess themselves because they haven't decided what they truly stand for. High standards remove that confusion. They become your compass. When you know what you demand of yourself, decisions become faster. You don't waste time debating whether to do what's right. You just do it because that's who you are now. People often mistake high standards for perfectionism, but they're not the same. Perfection is chasing an impossible outcome. High standards are about consistent alignment with your values and goals. They guide your behavior even when no one is watching. They help you say no to things that don't serve you and yes to the things that do, even if they're hard. This kind of clarity is a superpower. It simplifies your day, strengthens your resolve, and protects your time and energy from being wasted on things that don't matter. With clear standards, you don't ask, "What should I do?" You already know. You don't depend on willpower every time a choice comes up, because the choice was made long before the moment arrived. You've already decided what you will and will not tolerate, from yourself, from others, from life. That decision gives you power, it gives you momentum, and over time, it reshapes your environment, your relationships, your results. When you hold to your standards, the world begins to treat you differently. Not because it's changed, but because you have, and when you change, everything you touch changes with you. That's the power of clarity, the power of conviction, and the power of living by higher standards.